Okay, y'all have been waiting for a weapon tier list, and here it is. The only notes I'm going to make before we get started is that this one's going to be a lot more straightforward than my last one. When I ranked the mechs, I took the cost into account, which I would like to do, but it's very impractical when it comes to weapons because, some of them cost credits, some of them cost A-coins, and then you get access to different energies at different stages of the game. With that said, any weapon that costs credits is more often than not worth getting just because credits are easy to come by and it's a cheap way to get through the tiers. And then lastly, I had a lot of complaints on my mech tier list saying that it wasn't fair that I was ranking paid-only items very high. In my mind, that's the only way to do it. Like, you have to rank them assuming that they cost A-coins or credits. I can't rank everything low just because it's inaccessible, because then people would be like, oh, he ranked it really low, that means I shouldn't get it, I should get this thing that he ranked higher, and then people waste their money, right? People use these tier lists to inform their purchases all the time, and I'm fully aware of that. Anyone who's limited strictly to free-to-play items, which is most people, obviously, all you gotta do is just ignore the stuff that's not free-to-play, right? Just pretend it's not there, and then go with whatever's the highest on the list that is accessible to you, and that just goes for anybody at any stage of the game. Like, if you're in tier 3 in the gear hub, then you're not going to be worrying about trying to get freaking revokers or whatever's in S tier, right? You're just going to be worrying about getting the best that you can get in your tier that is actually accessible to you. With that said, I do understand the desire for a tier list that is based solely around free-to-play mechs, given how they perform with free-to-play weapons. And that is a thing that I'm considering doing, so let me know in the comments if you guys actually want to see that. Otherwise, let's get started. So, first up is Arctorrent. This thing is much weaker than it was, but it hasn't been good for a very long time. Actually, ever since the grade update, it wouldn't have gone past A tier at best. Probably would have stayed in B, but I'm going to put it in C. The mods actually did it a favor because sustained damage weapons do slightly better now. It probably would have gone in D before the mods came around. Autocannon. Obviously, D. If you could skip it, then skip it, but of course, you gotta get what you gotta get. Carbine. Also in C. I would say it is very bad, but it's definitely better than Arctorrent. It's got slightly better burst damage, slightly better sustained damage, but not by a lot. I've seen a lot of people, I think in my last tier list that was like a year ago, people made a lot of comments saying that like they do really well with Carbine's really good, etc, etc. And this was specifically Carbine too. And the only thing I have to say is like, yeah, if you buy a legendary item at rank 3 while you're a new player, like it's gonna do good, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good weapon, right? Chain gun. I also have to put in C. It's definitely better than Carbine, but like not by a lot. The mechanics of it make it just very undesirable. Otherwise, it's got pretty good DPS. Cryo Javelin. I will put this in mid. It's not the best, like javelins aren't great, but it's also a javelin rack, like you can kind of make good use of that pretty much all the time. Cryo Launcher, I would say is comparable to Cryo Javelin, but probably slightly better. They recently became available in the Gear Hub, and I was going to make a video, but then it like kind of spiraled into this like 2-hour tangent of me like going to every single map and seeing like where you have to stand in order to fire cryo launchers onto like enemy beacons and stuff. Yeah, it was, yeah, well, I'll just leave it at that. Disc launcher, I'm gonna have to say C. In some situations it can be decent, but not a lot. I would put it probably just below chain gun. Disruptor, I will say, is B. It's not good, but it's not bad. Mods definitely made it a lot weaker. And it's very weak to mods, but like if an enemy doesn't have mods, then like it's pretty decent. It's kind of situational. EM rifle, also B, though I am going to put it at the top of B because it has the range, right? Like similar to Disruptor, it's a weapon that relies on a single shot of damage, but it has a really good range that other weapons just don't have. A Revoker or Stormrack build like simply just can't reach you from that distance, whereas, you know, Disruptor has a bit shorter range, so it's not quite as practical. Ember Gun is definitely good, but I wouldn't say meta, at least not anymore. It's probably like top 10 weapons still, but yeah, I'm gonna reserve this for like the weapons I actually think are top tier. Fragment Gun, probably also B. Not bad, really good damage, but again, like suffers terribly to mods. I would put it above all of these though. Fusion Cannon, I mean, it's basically the exact same as Carbine, but like slightly weaker. Like it's actually crazy. Like the mag dump DPS and the sustained DPS are extremely similar, and both of those are slightly above Arc Torrent. Gauss Rifle, definitely D. Better than Autocannon at least. Graviton, I will say B. Well, my mouse is going all over the place right now. Probably worse than Disruptor. It was never like fantastic even before mods, but mods, even though they made sustained damage weapons better in general, they didn't do Graviton specifically any favors because it has to chew through shields as well as galvanic hull before it can even do any damage to the mech. And that's just extremely inconvenient. Helix Rack, I would put in A, probably at the top of A. Ember, I might leave an S for now, because like I said, it's definitely top 10, but I'm debating whether or not it's S or A. We'll see later when we get there. Javelin Rack is basically just Cryo Javelin, but worse. In fact, I would probably put both of them below these two. Long arm, definitely weak, although it's not the weakest, but yeah, it's still better than Gauss Rifle. Minigun, definitely S tier. I would probably put above Embers at this point, simply because Embers do not perform very well against mods at all, which is it's a pretty big deal at this point, though otherwise Ember's really good. That's kind of the reason I'm debating leaving it in S or putting it in A. I'll leave it there for now though. Missile Rack, probably A. It's a bit worse, but it's still usable, especially if you use the 16s. The Missile Rack 16 is actually very usable on pretty much every heavy mech, so it's not that bad. It's definitely worse than it was, but it's not bad. Nades, I would put in S at this point, quite possibly higher than Ember, because they're very good at dealing with mods, and actually nades have better DPS than Embers, if you're hitting from the back, which is pretty easy to do with nades. Not so much with Ember Gun, even with the overheat. Plasma Cannon. Pretty bad. Obviously better than Autocannon though. Pulse Cannon. Better than Plasma Cannon, but still worse than Gauss Rifle. Quantum Gun. Better than Gauss Rifle, but still really, really bad. This thing's damage is abysmal. And yes, before you ask, I did rank Long Arm over Quantum Gun. Long Arm has better burst DPS than Quantum Gun, and better sustained DPS than Quantum Gun, even though the whole point of Quantum Gun is basically being a sustained damage sniper type weapon. This thing has a really, really long reload, but it's still better at sustained fire. Railgun. Pretty good. Better than frags, but not better than EMs. Repeater is pretty bad. I'm actually going to put it at the very back of C. It has pretty bad DPS, like even the Magdum DPS is not particularly impressive, and it runs out of magazine extremely fast and it takes forever to reload. Or at least way longer than you want in a close quarters fight. Like, you can't afford to be reloading for that long. So yeah, it's just, it's terrible. It's better than Quantum Gun though. Rocket Mortar. I would put above Javelins, probably above Graviton, but probably not above Disruptor. The weapon itself obviously deals less damage per second than, like, Graviton, but you don't have to be out in the open to use it, and so that in itself is very valuable. That's the reason that the Javelin racks are up here, because, like, use the 12 or 16 on something, especially something that has a damage boost ability. Like, it still slaps pretty hard, honestly. RPG. Obviously trash, but probably better than Autocannon. Shotgun. Also trash. Slightly worse than Quantum Gun. Stasis Beam. Also trash. Worse than Quantum. Probably better than Shotgun. Storm Rack. Definitely top of S here. Very, very strong. As of the time of uploading this video, Storm Racks are still not available for free-to-play. However, I will say, for anyone who doesn't know, the current trend that has been going is that they have been releasing weapons in chronological order. So, like, the order that they add them to the game in, like, the events and stuff is the order they've been adding them for in-game currency. We just had Cryo Launcher not that long ago. The next one should be Quantum, and then right after that, Storm Rack. So possibly we get Storm Rack within the next 6 months or so. You know, unless they decide to put it off for like 2 years like they did Eclipse. Thermal Lance. Obviously trash. I'm going to put it at the very bottom, and you might say, well, you know, you can pair that with other weapons and get, like, the overheat effect and whatever. It's like, okay, sure, but, like, so what? That doesn't mean you should upgrade it or anything. Like, yeah, maybe buy it for credits, but yeah, don't do anything with it. All you're using it for is the overheat effect anyway. Plus, I'm ranking these based on how they perform by themselves, which obviously this does not perform by itself pretty much at all. Voltaic RPG is pretty weak. It's not trash, but it's very weak. Arguably better than Repeater, though. The burst damage of Repeater is a bit higher, but the sustained damage of Voltaic is higher than Repeater. And this thing also has radius as well as a lot better range, so I think Arguably, I think that makes the Voltaic win that pod gun. Okay, so this might be slightly controversial, but I'm going to put Podgun in S tier. And the reason is because it works really well as a substitute for like Helix Rack. It doesn't require a lock, and it doesn't have a minimum distance. It has a radius, the radius isn't fantastic, but it's really good against mods. This thing chews through mods like crazy, and is also like homing from 100 meters is kind of wild, as well as infinite range if you didn't know. You can shoot this thing as far as you want, and if somebody's there, they'll get hit by it. But more than that, I've been seeing this more in competitive matches, and I've been using it more in competitive matches because it's actually incredibly useful, especially against like lace wings and stuff. Basically a hard counter to lace wing. Particle beam. Particle beam is decent. I would say it's significantly better than Graviton, so I'm actually going to put it in A. Still below Missile Rack, but yeah, still A. It's pretty good. The beam can chew through the shield. If it has like a multi-layered shield, you can chew through the shield with the beam and then hit them with the blast and do like, you know, do the big damage after their shield's gone. And it's not too bad. Yeah, it's also really easy to use it as a single implant weapon. So it's not the worst option, but it's also just a little bit lacking in damage. Revoker. Obviously S tier. Now the question is whether or not it's better than Stormrack. I would say that arguably it is, even though like one Revoker build versus one Stormrack build, the Stormrack would probably win because it has the range advantage. But when you're determining which one's generally better than the other, you know, you don't have a theoretical 1v1, right? Because otherwise, like theoretically 1v1, freaking Fuse Mortar would kill everything because it doesn't even have to expose itself. So yeah, I'm gonna put Revoker at the very top of the meta chain. That thing is disgustingly OP. And before anyone asks, yes, I'm aware that there's a bug with the damage. Hopefully that bug is fixed soon, but you know, it's impossible to tell. I wouldn't say that they're at all consistent in terms of like how long it takes them to fix this specific bug. Viper is good, not meta. It has better DPS than Minigun. The problem is that it's really difficult to hit stuff. It relies entirely on the rocket. The rocket is 50% of the damage output, and the rocket misses quite a lot. So it kind of depends on the situation. But you know, if you got really good aim and you're not fighting a stealthed enemy, then these things will shred. Better than Particle. Probably better than Missile Rack as well, though not better than Missile Rack on everything. You know, if you had like a Gatecrasher or something, you're questioning between Missile Rack 16 and Viper 16, I'd still go with the Missile Rack just because most heavy mechs prefer the burst damage over the sustained damage. But on a lot of medium mechs, the Viper will do better. Fuse Mortar. Arguably S tier. It is very, very annoying. I would say if I have Ember Gun here, then I should probably put Fuse Mortar here, because Fuse Mortar is probably better. But for the sake of argument, I may or may not bring both of these down just to keep like the S tier with just 5 things, so that people, you know, top 5 weapons, just to make it easier for people. I mean, this is the meta tier, right? You know, these are arguably meta. They're substitute meta, right? Like anyone who's actually running a fully meta hanger is only going to use Revokers and Stormracks, right? So I'm not claiming that every single one of these things are equally valuable or used the same amount. I mean, obviously they're, ranked in order for a reason. So whether whether you think they're just good weapons or substitute meta weapons, then kinda up to you. Savant. I would say B. They're very mid. They do really bad against mods, which makes me sad because Savants were like incredibly entertaining to use before mods came around. Better than Railgun, though I would not say that they are better than EM Rifle. Overdriver. Pretty good. Less DPS than Viper, if you hit your rockets. And it also takes time for you to build up the damage boost on them, so I'd actually put them below Missile Racks as well, but above Particle Beam still. And then finally, the newest weapon, Howler. Howler is very similar to like Railgun and Fragment Gun, where it's like they have individual shots that do a lot of damage, and they have like 4+ shots in the magazine. Railgun has 3, Howler has 4, Frag has I think 6. But Railgun obviously does the most damage per shot out of all of those. Without mods, if you're not facing an enemy with mods, or if your shields are gone or something like that, then Howlers are very strong. But they, once again, suffer very much against mods simply because all of their damage is packed into a single hit, and that obviously means that all of that damage is going to go into a single shield layer if that enemy happens to have a multi-layered shield, which, if it's a player, most of them do because that's the cheapest one. So yeah, that is the finished list. I did take an hour or so before this video to look up some DPS numbers and check some stats and stuff, as well as do some preemptive placements. So yes, I knew where I was going to place everything before I even started the video. These two, I was kind of on the fence as to whether or not I wanted to put them in S or A. I'm going to leave them in S just because I think they're S worthy. But otherwise, yeah, the only note I will make before I finish is, as always, everybody starts from the bottom and works their way up. If you're in tier 3 in the gear hub, you can get Carbine and still do really well. You're getting weapons that are down here a lot of the time, and then you move up to weapons that are like here, and then you gradually move upward, and that's just how it goes. Some of the worst weapons are worth getting, like Disc Launcher, particularly Disc Launcher 8. When you first get access to it, it's incredibly strong. Some stronger weapons may not be worth getting, like Missile Rack 8 when you're starting off. Costs a lot of A coins, and it's also not particularly strong at that level. So yeah, just because I ranked it low doesn't necessarily mean it can't work for you, but I would highly encourage everyone to work toward the things that are in the higher tiers if you're not currently using them. The most accessible of those being like nades, embers, and missile racks. Otherwise, yeah. As always, the link to this list is in the description of the video, so if you want to rank these yourself, feel free. If you make a video out of it, feel free to tag me. I'd be very interested in watching that. Otherwise, you can join my Discord and share a screenshot of the results there. Just keep in mind that not everyone's necessarily going to agree with you. But otherwise, that will be it from me. Appreciate y'all. Take care.